Hey everyone, it's Patch 3.22 Ancestor, and I want to talk about some of the findings that we've discovered so far in 3.22. So the first major discovery is a new gem that's absolutely insane for our build, and pretty much everyone should try to immediately fit in. And the other thing I want to talk about are the tattoos and which tattoos are actually worth considering for your build and what you should immediately add. So the first thing I want to go over is the new gem. We have Temporal Rift, which is a gem you pretty much have never added in any build ever. What this does is it makes a few ghosts behind you, and you can hit it again to go back to your oldest ghost. This is kind of a pseudo mobility skill, and it's like, I guess it's kind of nice because you can use it to dodge some abilities, but this has literally never been included in any build. And I think most people just either didn't know this existed or just thought this was a complete meme skill. But for our build, it's actually insane. So we're not going to actually use it for what it's meant to use. We're just going to simply turn it on because it just reserves 10% of your mana. And we're going to be using an anomalous version of it, which gives us just flat cooldown recovery rate at all times. Anomalous Temporal Rift literally just turns the aura into a cooldown reduction aura, which I never knew existed in this game up to this point. Not only is this amazing for this build, but this actually has a lot of implementations for a lot of other different builds that need CDR in them. But with this, because the cooldown reduction is from the quality, we can actually give it a quality with Enhance to make it even stronger. So with a level 3 Enhance, we make it be 9% cooldown recovery. And with a level 4 Enhance, we would make it 10% cooldown recovery. And the nice thing about that is if we're going to end up running an Enhance anyway, we might as well just link it to our Anomalous Withering Step, which we are already running anyway, which gives us additional Wither stacks to make it give us 9 Wither stacks or 10 with the level 4 one, meaning between this and Nature's Reprisal, you actually have a really, really easy time to hit 15 Wither stacks on everything. And because most of it is coming from the Withering Step, you immediately are ramping your damage even faster because you don't have to wait for the Wither stacks to build up. You just immediately do 10 stacks. And if you didn't know, every 1% of cooldown recovery rate is just 1% more damage for this build. So effectively, Temporal Rift with a level 4 Enhance is just a free 10% damage. The only bad thing is we need to actually fit it in, but it's really easy to make up the space that we need to fit another reservation aura in here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get ourselves in lane. A level 3 in lane works. You do not need a level 4 in lane, but a level 4 one would be nice because it'll actually end up saving you a few tattoos, which we'll talk about later. Linking a lane to your Grace, your Herald of Agony, and your Purity of Elements, while also picking up the reservation node at Influence, is enough to make everything work together. The only issue with that is it's not really efficient because we're just wasting 2 points. And we can actually get around that by fitting in a bunch of reservation tattoos. So if we want to look at path of building really quickly, this is my current setup. I want to talk about the tattoos that are good to fit into your build and some tattoos that in my opinion are really kind of bait and not worth touching at all. So as I mentioned earlier, you can instead drop these 2 points and just fit in 7 1% reservation tattoos. Now, personally, I split these between my int nodes, since we have so many int nodes, and my dexterity nodes. I put an additional one here. And it's kind of hard for me to tell you where to put these because everyone's going to have a different amount of attributes. I don't know if you have an int roll on one of your rings, or if you have a dex roll on one of your rings, or if you just have a bunch of extra attributes from some places. One thing I want to say is because tattoos are going to be so strong, you can actually make an argument to never go and bother to get a damage multiplier amulet and instead just stick with your Eternal Struggle the whole season. Just because Eternal Struggle has so many attributes on it, if you actually were running one, you can just permanently tattoo every single node on your tree, which is kind of powerful. It's actually really, really strong. But you will have to spread your reservation tattoos however you can, but 7 of them should be more than enough to get rid of the 2 passive points. One thing, if you're struggling with having enough attributes, either you need more dex or strength or whatever, what you could do is you can turn some of the nodes that you don't need into +4 attributes. So a few of my nodes are tattooed with the +4 to all attributes node, which makes it really easy for me to hit my intelligence and my dexterity breakpoints while still removing most of my points. Another thing to mention for tattoos is if you are still running a Leaper's Alms, eventually you're going to be upgrading to a Series Reflection, or you're going to be upgrading to a Dawnbreaker. A Series Reflection is the better option if you want more utility. It gives you movement speed, it gives you all res, It makes it so curses don't affect you, and it makes you do more damage because it increases your effective curses. The reason you might want to use a Dawnbreaker instead is because Dawnbreaker is going to fully convert your physical damage to elemental, making you substantially tankier. But no matter which choice you pick, you're going to be losing some spell suppression. And because of that, you won't be spell suppression capped anymore. Now, in my specific case, I have a tier 2 spell suppression roll on my helmet and a tier 1 spell suppression roll on my boots. But with that, I'd only be at about 90-ish% spell suppression chance. So what I ended up doing is I fit in 7 2% spell suppression rolls on my dex notes. And with this, I was able to drop both resourcefulness and instinct. And I was able to drop the spell suppress is lucky mastery and instead pick up the prevent 3% of spell suppress damage. So if you haven't upgraded yet and you're looking to consider either shields, make sure you remember that your spell suppression is not going to be capped anymore and add some of these spell suppression tattoos into your build. The last thing I want to talk about are some of the other tattoos that you might be able to fit in on some of the other nodes if you have some extra space. So one of the really, really strong tattoos that came out this season are the flask effect duration tattoos. These are insane. Now, in our builds, we're either going to be using a Progenesis or a Onslaught Flask. And the problem with both of them is it's basically impossible to get 100% uptime on them. As you can see, my Progenesis has 80% uptime. And if you're running a Silver Flask, it's literally the same thing. Or if you're running a Quicksilver Flask, it's also the same thing there. You'll have about 80% uptime at best. And what you could do instead is if you can fit about 5 flask effect duration tattoos into your build somewhere, which is really easy to do if you have Eternal Struggle, because you can just turn all of these dex nodes at the start of the Ranger tree into it. You can turn the Strength node over here by wasting into it. You turn this point. You can turn a decent chunk of these in some of your end points as well. And you should be able to get 100% flask duration on your Progenesis, your Silver Flask, or your Onslaught Flask really, really easily, making these super, super OP. Now, if you have enough of these and you still have a few nodes left over, what I might recommend is to fit in some of the 2% max life tattoos. These are the only other really good ones. Unfortunately, most of the other tattoos are kind of whatever and don't really affect our build at all. But for any filler nodes you have anywhere else, just slap on a bunch of 2% increased life tattoos, as you can never go wrong with a little bit of extra life. The last thing I want to talk about is a really bait tattoo, which I don't recommend fitting into your build, and another interesting tech that you might be able to do if you want to drop your Onslaught Flask. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Curse Effect tattoo. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, Allie, should we be running this tattoo in our build? And my answer is no. Running this tattoo really, really isn't worth it. Now, 8% increased effective curses is pretty strong. That is quite a lot of DPS. It is about 6% of our DPS. But the problem is you need to have 7 adjacent passive skills allocated. And the only 2 places you can fit this into our build is one over here by the Ranger Frenzy Charge, which is bad because all these nodes suck and we don't actually want them in our build. And 2 is right here. But if we want to fit it right here, as you can see, getting 7 passive points here is kind of ugly. We need to pick up these 3, but the problem is we're most likely going to tattoo them. Then we need to pick up the attribute nodes. And the only problem here is the strength one is kind of garbage. There's nothing good here. There's just the +1 maximum fire res, which I guess you can say is pretty decent. But otherwise, we'd have to pick up a point in the ignore stuns. We'd have to pick up a point in the AoE. And we'd have to pick up a random intelligence point here, making this a little bit awkward to do. And in my opinion, these passive points are just not worth it. Instead, you could just take these 4 passive points and just put them somewhere else and just get more damage than this tattoo would actually give you. And it's just completely worthless in my opinion to add this in. Now, another thing that is worth adding in is the Onslaught on Hit tattoo. Now, Impending Doom is a hit that applies poisons, so we actually would be able to use this in our build. And with this, we can completely just drop our Onslaught Flask and run a Quicksilver Flask, or just run a Progenesis, or it eliminates the need for you to run a Onslaught on Hit ring if you were doing an Onslaught ring instead. It is going to cost a passive point, which is going to be a little bit pricey, but really you can just drop a mastery somewhere where you just get 1 additional level. And for a whole point, just being able to have permanent Onslaught on Hit without having to need anything else is insane. And I would recommend to fit this into your build ASAP. This tattoo is a little bit expensive. I think it's currently around 4 to 5 div, but for how strong that is and for how strong this is, because your onslaught flask isn't going to be permanent versus this being permanent, meaning you can rely that as a permanent source of 20% more cast speed for your setup. It just makes this a really, really good value proposition. And I would strongly recommend for you to look into this. That's all I really have to say about the tattoos. I kind of expected more, in my opinion. I kind of expected more of these to be good, but honestly, I'm still pretty happy with what we currently have. I like that we have the flask effect duration ones. I like that we have the life ones. I like that we have the spell suppression ones, giving us a really, really big breather in our build and allowing us to just more easily be able to fit everything while making some of the portions of our build a little bit stronger. There's a few in here that I haven't mentioned that are just kind of meh, in my opinion. They're pretty decent if you really do want to add them in, but I just personally don't really think that they're strong enough to actually just include or to tell people about. A good one being the recoup one. If you really have more int nodes and you don't want to run life, which in my opinion, life is better, you could always just fit in the recoup ones everywhere, which I guess are kind of nice, but they're not better than life. And then everything else either just doesn't apply to our build or is just very mediocre. If you have any questions, I always stream on Twitch every single day. I'll be happy to answer your questions there, or please feel free to leave them a comment. I'll try to answer them as fast as I can. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you kitties in the next one.